week after what I, and I imagine most of you, consider to be a disastrous election in my country, in particular disastrous for the people in the United States living in the margins of society, poor people, people of color, women, LGBTQ folks. Being here with you is rather uplifting. It's been a rough week for Americans who work in the world of creating ethical businesses. Rapacious capitalism seems to have won the day, and I'm finding it very, very hard to be hopeful. I'm also in the unique position of being one of the very few speakers here who is both a business person and a clergy person. As he mentioned, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family in the newspaper business, but always felt the tug to be in the church, and was in my mid-40s when I went to seminary and was ordained a priest in the Episcopal Church, the U.S. equivalent of the Church of England. It's my seminary training that informs much of what I want to say today about the state of the world and social capital markets, our conferences, of response to it. The Episcopal Church is very similar to the Roman Catholic Church, as our worship is centered around the Mass, the Eucharist. Gathering at the table is our most important action, and each Sunday we gather as a family of believers who share together the bread and the wine and a simple meal that binds us together. It binds us as followers of Jesus Christ, whose overwhelming message was the care for the poor, the orphan, the stranger, the destitute. It binds us not just to each other as Christians, though. It binds us to the whole human family. Jesus was clear that we were to love the other as ourselves, and he also made it clear that the neighbor was not just proximity. It's a relationship we have with those in need around us, regardless of distance. So, a critique I have for my country's religious right is that somehow the new evangelical Christians have come to believe that acting or voting in their own self-interest is what defines Christianity. There's polling that says that 81% of the evangelical Christians who voted for Mr. Trump, that their main reason was to get back to smaller government, one that didn't have as many giveaways for people in need, one that would let them have guns to protect themselves, and one that would allow them to build a wall to keep strangers in need out of our country. I think it's obvious, but for rhetoric's sake, one might ask, what on earth does this have to do with SoCal? I think that's why she's talking. Why did she start out talking about American politics instead of the topic at hand? There are several reasons, but one that I want to focus on here is a rather obscure verse of Scripture, and one that I think that is critical for all of us wondering what this world is coming to. The last half of the verse, 1 Peter 3:15, says, "Always be prepared to give an account of the hope that is within you." Always be prepared to give an account of the hope that is within you, even when things look like they are going to ruin. In this time of great despair in my country and the lost ideal of being a refuge for the immigrant and a place of compassion for all humanity, some might find it strange that I turn for that hope to something that many are disparaging, and that is the system of capitalism. But instead of rapacious capitalism, I am talking about the stories I hear day in and day out in my work as executive producer of social capital markets, or SoCap as we call it. SoCap has grown in the last 9 years from a gathering of about 600 people from a dozen or so countries to an annual event drawing nearly 3,000 people from about 70 countries to San Francisco. And particularly in these days of political upheaval, talking about SoCap is how I give an account of the hope that is within me. So thank you to the organizers of this conference for the opportunity to bring what I believe are very good tidings to all of you gathered here. Now for the rest of the talk, I've asked those folks who live up in that booth up there to run a loop of slides of our last conference and some information about how to learn more about SoCap, so you can get an idea of what SoCap looks like. If y'all can start the slides. SOCAP was born out of the simple but strange idea that people might be willing to put some of their investment money into business ideas that serve the greater good, extending their philanthropy into their investment portfolios. Not just giving money away, but investing it in for-profit companies that do good work and just work for people in need and for the planet. And when the day is over, also return capital at a fair rate to their investors. And that is the basic conversation at SOCAP. How to invest in doing good, impact investing. But following our principal idea of being the conference at the intersection of money and meaning, it has also taken us into a space beyond being only for investors, into an almost festival-like event that gathers not just investors, but also entrepreneurs and academicians and a wide variety of folks who are simply interested in seeing how they can use their money for good. SOCAP takes place on the Bay in San Francisco, a beautiful place, and it is a liminal space, a space in between. It's a space in between using your money for your own self-interest and investing with a shared interest in the well-being of the world. It's a conference that is between staying focused on how to make money and a conference that allows people to be engaged with other ways money can be used to give meaning to your lives. It's a place where investors and entrepreneurs can come together and talk about how to change the world and be concerned together about how, if making money is the highest priority, then their new business venture might have negative, unintended consequences for the world. SOCAP is a place where the fiduciary responsibility is not solely to make the highest return on investment, but also to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people and for the planet. SOCAP creates a place where entrepreneurs and investors can come together in a conversation that leads to a relationship, not just about the transaction. People's values are respected, not just their ideas. SOCAP is a place where the valuable stranger is discovered and might turn into a very unlikely ally. SOCAP is a completely secular event, not related to the church or any other spiritual entity, and it is a for-profit business, putting its money and profits where its mouth is. But people bring their whole selves to this conference. People come to ask questions and to find their souls. People tired of business as usual come seeking a new way to do business in a way that they can sleep at night and not worry about the world that they and their money are creating. We have had some pretty interesting religious conversations through the years, however. We have some open forums and people come regularly to bring up matters of faith. One that tells the story of SOCAP is about a totally secular investor who was a real estate investment guy who came to SOCAP kind of at the last minute. His story reminds me of Nicodemus sneaking out of New York to head to SOCAP to ask, what do I do to be saved? It seems he had a real estate deal in the developing world, diamond mines or some oil deals, with workers not much more than slaves. His wife was looking at the cost of the remodel she was doing in the kitchen, and there were 2 daughters to put through college, and she wanted him to do that deal. The 2 high school aged daughters got wind of it and said, Dad, you can't do that deal. It's not good for the planet. And his gut, his spirit was saying, don't. People will be hurt. But what should he do? He and his wife needed the money. He wasn't sure the deal was going to hurt people, but it might. And his kids were clear, but what did they know? How would he make that decision? He came to SOCAP to see how to find a new way to be an investor in business, but not to feel at the end of the day that his work was hurting and not helping the world. I don't know what he decided. I don't even remember his name, but I know he was asking real questions about how his actions were changing the world for good or not. Over the 9 years, we've seen the conversation grow from about 600 folks to 3,000 present in San Francisco this last year, and many, many more following online. From an esoteric group of folks wondering how to do something completely outside the mainstream into a conversation that we hope is headed toward broad acceptance. From an event once sponsored by only an obscure foundation to one that now draws upon the resources of traditional major investment banks and corporate funders. From a conference about simply how to invest in companies with a double or triple bottom line to an event that celebrates entrepreneurship. We still talk about topics such as taking new companies to scale and developing partnerships with public and philanthropic sectors, keeping true to your mission as your business grows. But we also focus on bringing the tactics of investment and innovation to marginalized communities so that whole neighborhoods can benefit from a new venture, not simply a single person getting a job. We are seeing more and more that entrepreneurship and business ownership are the path to financial success, not only in the developing world, but also for minorities and immigrants in the United States. For African Americans, for example, in the U.S., the wealth gap between whites and blacks is more than 14-fold. It shrinks to 3 times, a reduction of more than 75% when a black person in America owns a business. And each year we work hard to increase the number of entrepreneurs who attend SOCAP on full scholarship. We are now approaching 10% of our attendees being entrepreneurs who have either been granted a full or almost full scholarship to attend. In these entrepreneurs and in the people who come to SOCAP ready to invest in them, I find hope, a great deal of hope. I believe SOCAP is growing toward what I can imagine one day will be a true business revolution. Yes, Seamus, capitalism 2.0, or maybe 10.0. A world where people will demand that their money, even their investments, work at night and work for good. Where people understand that the economy is not neutral, that our money carries an ethical footprint. SOCAP arose in response to an ethical and moral hunger, people who knew that they should be paying more attention to what their money did, and they wanted to put that into action. SOCAP created that path, and people have responded, showing up year after year. When I am at SOCAP, I see people committed to bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth. People who want to make sure that all of God's children have the resources they need to have a full and dignified life. And I have hope. It's a start. As Margaret Mead famously said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Thank you very much.